Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Revere End podcast. Unfortunately, like the other two, I can't refer to the fact that we're in person. I guess we're kind of gone into our own lockdown a little bit early, haven't we? We decided to against it this time. But regardless, I'm joined by Billy again. Billy, how you doing, mate?
Very well. I'm sat on my sofa without you, which,
Yeah,
despite only recording a few of the podcasts today, does feel weird. But and I think you talked it up last time, actually, didn't you? You sort of said
yeah, I
like we'd
did.
be doing it for the foreseeable future, and then Bob's your uncle. It's been taken away, but yeah, we're back on Zoom today. Yeah, looking forward to it. But yeah, obviously a little bit annoyed we can't do it in person.
Well,
Although
we've
to be
got
fair, saying that, we've had a few technical issues recording in
yeah,
person the last
you're
few
not
times, so
wrong.
maybe it's best off that we stay on Zoom.
Maybe for our audio viewers, this is going to be a little bit better than I guess the technical issues we had matching up audio last time. Regardless, though, however, we've had a good week and a lot to kind of recap. The two games, of course. I suppose I should remind you because you probably forgot of Brentford. We'll be covering that game as well because that was since our last podcast, and then we'll be having a look ahead to Bristol City as well. And it's also going to be interesting to what myself, and Billy, and a couple of people that we've kind of interacted with on Twitter and in the comments had to say about going into this week, our kind of expectations, because obviously in the last episode we kind of talked about how it was pretty inconclusive, and I think it's fair to say it's been a very positive week for Norwich. Now, I guess if we kind of start where the week kicked off with Brentford and kind of jump straight into that game because we've got so much to cover between the two. It was a game that really I felt like was quite defining in terms of it was a team that we've kind of both highlighted that kind of was very similar to Norwich in not only the on the pitch but off the pitch as well in terms of the kind of ethics of the club, if you like, and how it's run. And to be fair, it was quite a close game. I'd like to. I guess that's a kind of like
Yeah.
the overall judgment I give of it. If I was to say, based off the play, what team overall kind of deserved it more, I don't know what you kind of think about this, but I'd say we're quite fortunate to get a point. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obviously looking at maybe like the chances Brentford created, we know sort of how good of a side they are, and we know how clinical Tony is up front. But yeah, it's really hard, isn't it, to differentiate your sort of views on Brentford when we've obviously had such a good win against Bristol City. But in terms of if I try and sort of focus on that game in isolation, I was quite disappointed. I wasn't really getting carried away at the fact we sort of got a point at one of the best sides in the league. But and maybe if you look at from the scoreline, it probably does. It probably is a little bit generous on us. But I don't know. Like I wouldn't say I took too much positivity from that game. But then you think about maybe some of the chances we had with the Hanley header and the Buendia chance. That maybe we weren't as far away off as we thought we were. But then I kind of feel like that's just the positivity from Bristol sort of seeping into me. But it was look, if you get a point away at Brentford, it's always good. So in terms of the result, absolutely buzzing, like more than happy to get a point. But and maybe to be honest, thinking about the circumstances surrounding it, obviously with Quintia having to pull out and not having any real threat down that left hand side, and then changing it so early on, obviously at half time, which has seldom been done under Norwich under Farke, that maybe it wasn't. It was quite a good point, and we dealt with maybe the circumstances fairly well.
Well, I guess we're kind of seeing a little bit more now, even more so that we kind of play a game in three halves in a way. You know, we usually kind of dominate, come out the box early, and that was evident. You know, when Dia had an absolutely unbelievable chance. I mean, we looked, you know, it was liquid football for the first kind of 10, 15 minutes. I remember Vrancic hit one that just went wide. I mean, we've really found those gaps between the midfield and the defense of Brentford. You know, that's at that point it felt like, okay, this is actually going to be not an easy game, but one that we could potentially control. But again, we kind of had that kind of spell I mean, I guess ironically, we went 1-0 down as well. That was the 27th minute by Ivan Toney. And I guess from that kind of point onwards, and a couple minutes before that, it was really a case of until we kind of kicked into gear late second half. And that's kind of last third, if you like. You know, we dominated the first, we dominated the kind of end part, and that middle part is really what defines the game. Would you agree with that? Can you kind of see that? Like, how do you feel about
Yeah,
that point?
Norwich, it does seem to be like very topsy turvy their games this season. I don't know if that's just the Championship. I don't know if that's sort of Norwich's fragility at the moment, but I completely agree. Like one moment you're thinking, well, how many goals are we going to get? You know, just give us the league title now. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, maybe it's mid-table mediocrity. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, probably fair enough results. So yeah, the emotions of Norwich fan during games at the moment have been pretty crazy. But yeah, we've said it before, and maybe to be honest, if we're talking about the different moments in games and the different times that Norwich look in control, maybe that is where the difference was between Brentford and Bristol. You know, I don't want to come onto it too early, but I think about that positive start at Brentford, and then I think about the positive start at Bristol, and what's different between those two games is the goal. And how many times have we watched Norwich in the past few months, maybe in the past year, and gone, oh, we started really well. First 10, 15 minutes, we were brilliant. But if you don't score that first goal, it makes it a lot more problematic for yourself. And at Brentford, we didn't do that. Brentford then, take the lead. But maybe that's where the difference is, and maybe, hopefully we see a little bit more from Norwich.
Well, I think in terms of, and again, it's tough because when we reference this game, obviously we're referencing it as if we haven't seen the Bristol game happen. Because I think that
it's tough. It's tough.
It was a very against the typical kind of Norwich performance from the season we've seen so far, right? I guess in kind of what I mean by that is that typically I'd say that we create all these chances and it's lovely free-flowing football, and that is the same as almost the year we went up, but we're just nowhere near as clinical. Like I think we had 14 registered shots with only 3 on target, and I mean, if you're counting the goal as 1 on target as well, then you can pretty much say 2 on target, really. And against a team like that, where if you can come away with 2 shots on target at 14, that's luck to a degree, isn't it?
I mean, you talk about the shots there, and I was doing a little bit of digging earlier, and we're actually taken just under sort of 18 shots sort of per 90 minutes, and that's actually higher than when we won the league, which is interesting because I think it's about 2 shots per game more. And I think Norwich maybe are showing that side that they're not as sort of wanting to just walk the ball into the box, that they are sort of happy to, to pull the trigger, I suppose. And we've seen that particularly from midfield. But, I mean, we've had 51 shots on target this season so far, which is sort of like the second highest in the league, I think. So maybe, it's just about the penetration. And again, like that's probably where we differ from the Brentford to the Bristol game.
I think in terms of, I guess key personnel, let's just say, from that game, which I guess I wanted to kind of raise. There's a couple of players, mainly the kind of whole left-hand side for good or bad reason, in Todd Cantwell and Jakob Lundby Sorensen, who I didn't think I'd say would be on the left-hand side at, 5 minutes before kickoff. I guess 2 kind of contrasting games, really, because you've got Todd Cantwell, who reportedly had an injury coming into the game, which I guess later kind of is maybe the reason why we didn't see him feature, even though he was on the bench against Bristol. But to be fair to Todd, because, I think naturally, and I've been guilty of this sometimes, we are quite tough on the kind of lads that come through the academy. It's well documented, I guess, in the kind of fan base. But this really wasn't one of his better games. He didn't really look like he was, I guess, physically up to it in terms of his running, his work rate, etc. I know it's been maybe a little bit cynical, but I feel like we were kind of both sat there in conjunction thinking that we needed an outlet like Paqueta on the left-hand side, who did eventually come on. But I didn't know if you kind of wanted to add anything on Todd. Maybe can we kind of not cut him some slack, but I guess understand more because of the injury that he was supposedly carrying as to why he now obviously may have kind of not played as well in that big, what was a fairly big game for Norwich. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, it's tough, isn't it, for Farke? Because he obviously wants to have some sort of continuity from game to game, especially, if you can get 3 points. But we've said about this before. We said about Xavi and Paqueta that we don't feel like those 2 can really operate together because they essentially vacate the same space, or they want to sort of run into the same space, and there's no sort of variation. And I think, look, obviously, with the whole Sorensen debacle with him coming in 4 minutes before kickoff, I can't really fault Farke for that because he then sort of addresses that problem at half time. But it is tough for Todd, regardless of an injury, when you want to come centrally and play more as a number 10, you then need somebody overlapping you. And Sorensen obviously doesn't do that because, he's not a left-footed left back.
Yeah.
And I think when Plaqueta come on, and then when Plaqueta starts against Bristol, it was far more promising because all of a sudden Norwich then had more of a balanced attacking approach down both flanks, which wasn't there against Brentford. I mean, Sorensen was brilliant. Just to touch him for a moment, I think he seems such an intelligent footballer, and there has been a little talk about how good he could be in midfield, but I've said it before that I think he is an option in defence. I didn't necessarily think that'd be at left back, but I was really impressed with him. But Todd's a player that I think if we can get the best out of him this year, will be a real key component to this Norwich City side. But I'm still not convinced that on the left is where he's going to be his most effective.
I think in terms of, just to kind of touch on Sorensen, as I kind of said earlier, he was fantastic under the circumstances. I don't think there's any doubt that there was definitely a kind of an air of not, I guess, being uncomfortable, but I think the team, you could visually see that whatever they've been working on, because the team would be pretty much settled from most. A couple of days in advance, they'd have an idea of who'd be playing, and Quintilla has been in the team since minute one this year, so I guess there's a kind of understanding there, which even players like Ben Gibson or Lucas Rupp or Skipper, who's playing that left side, and would have with him. So I think the first kind of couple of minutes, there was definitely that kind of air of, all right, how is this going to go? He was signed as a CDM centre back, and he's now playing left back as a right footer. It was a real one where, if it went wrong, it would have blown up in his face and gone, okay, well, Webber, why is McCallum out on loan playing right wing for Coventry? Why has this happened? And I think, to be fair, it kind of showed how versatile of a footballer he can be, because I saw a lot of people kind of highlighting the fact that you can't really judge too much from him out on the left. And I think what's fair to say is that at fullback, you do get a little bit more time on the ball sometimes than in midfield. But it wasn't that I guess excited me about him. It was the duels that he was winning. It was whether it was aerial or whatnot. It was the way he would flick it from his left to his right foot and make a ball inside. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting him to be the most athletic player running down the ring and overlapping Todd. I knew that wasn't going to happen. But when he did get the ball, he was composed. He felt like he was in a position where he could pick out that pass. And he was showing clear signs that if he was in that centre-back role, or if he was in that midfield role, I have confidence that he would be a good player for the level that we're currently playing. And, I think, okay, we can't really make that explicit judgment until we see it. But I don't know if you kind of got that same kind of feeling that he was showing a lot of good attributes to show that he could play in that position in the Championship at least.
No, he's a signing that really impresses me. And it wasn't until after the Brentford game that I actually found out that he was very close to moving to Brentford in January. Which initially, when I was watching the game, and obviously it was quite ironic that Sorensen started, given the circumstances, and obviously we know what Brentford are like with sort of Danish recruitment. The fact that, I think it was, I read that Brentford wanted to loan him back and he didn't want to do that. So Norwich, this is obviously probably a player that Thomas Frank knew and Brentford knew, but maybe not in that position. I think, just to touch on the recruitment quickly, you spoke about the Sam McCallum, I suppose, I don't know, debacle. It's something that's raised eyebrows, the fact that we've let him go out on loan. And I think, to be honest, I can see in those fullback areas why, well, I suppose right back isn't really relevant because we do have Byram and come back and Mumba, obviously we saw on Saturday, but on left back we don't have a natural replacement for Quintilla. For me, that's not where my issue is, because I think if I'm going to point my finger where my worries are, I think it is that centre back position, because we'd be down to Alex Tettey at defence or in defence, or Sorensen in defence, which I think can be considered an option, a stretch, but it's not something I want to rely on. I think my worry, in terms of the recruitment, in terms of our squad, is just how different like each player is like in each role. So, for example, like you've got Todd and Shemislev out wide on that left. That they're two completely like polarizing players. And what then has to happen is like your game plan and your approach has to shift considerably, because all of a sudden you've got two players who play completely differently. Like Todd and Plaqueta couldn't be far apart from each other. That's my worry, is that when somebody drops out in midfield, it's probably not as big of an issue. But for example, up front, right, the threat that Pukki has in behind, all of a sudden Hugo's going to play completely differently. And right, you can look at that and go, oh, but we've got horses for courses, we've got plan B, different approach, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that's how Norwich worked. I thought they had their way of playing and were pretty much stuck to it. So I think that in terms of like what I've learned, I suppose, from that game, that was something that really was apparent to me. It was like all of a sudden I realized just how quite different players we have in different roles. And obviously I am also concerned probably about the centre back situation. It's fine at the moment, but this time next week it could be a massive issue.
Well, I definitely can see both sides of what you've definitely said there, because part of me is like, okay, it's good to have a plan B. Like, I definitely agree with that. I think, you know, if you go back to our first kind of ever really videos together we talked about how it was lack of plan B, but it does definitely feel like we're trying to strike that balance. I think, to be fair, if we had Kieran Dow right now and we also had Ono Hernandez, it wouldn't be maybe as bad, because Ono, Paqueta, I guess you could kind of strike a similarity, and maybe likewise with Todd and Dow. But I think the problem is right now is that with the current squad setup we have, you're definitely right in terms of Todd has to start if Javi Quintilla comes back into that team, because you can't play left-hand side of Plaqueta and Javi Quintilla. So if you don't do that, who do you play? Because you're not going to not play Javi Quintilla because you haven't got a left back. You know what I mean? So I think that's my problem. That's my worry right now, is that we haven't even got like basic depth in a lot of positions. You know, like you could have picked any one of those substitutes to play left back against that Brentford team. Like Michael McGovern could have played there.
Especially considering like Kenny McLean and Steeperman have both played there, have also both played in the Championship for Norwich, and are both left-footed. Like that's I think what really surprised me about Sorensen was like it. I don't know, because like he obviously rates Sorensen highly, but then again, Sorensen hasn't been involved thus far. So like why? Like it seemed a strange decision. Like the easy decision is just to place probably McLean, I'd say, over Steeperman, because I still don't really see him as a left back at all. I think it was just sort of like almost like a really bizarre situation he found himself in that campaign. But like McLean has moved to left back like quite regularly, like towards the back end of games when we've been chasing it. So yeah, I mean, fair play. Like it was bold, but well, you know, we've come to sort of expect maybe the unexpected from Farke.
What I was going to say, it's very Farke-esque, wasn't it? Really, to kind of convert a player that was signed as a central defensive mid to centre mid to then now come in as like a potential left back, right? Yeah. Like everything goes against
the grain, doesn't it?
Yeah. Exactly, right. I mean, in terms of like the only thing I kind of wanted to highlight before we move on to Bristol City was just my thoughts on like Grant Hanley, because it's a weird one, right? It's a tough conversation, because Grant Hanley on the surface has effectively, if you look at the ratings, played a couple of fantastic games, right?
I wouldn't look too much into those, but
well, that's what I guess I've come to learn. I think there's a lot of the main question I'm answering myself right now is that if you have three defenders, because that's all we have, fit in Zimmerman, Hanley, and get Ben Gibson. Ben Gibson is one of the best defenders in this division, so he takes that spot every day of the week. I'm not worried about him. I think my worries is Hanley possesses qualities, as we've mentioned about before, with his pace, his ability to kind of cover round, which I think is amazing, fantastic, and is looked over to a degree. My worries is he's such a clumsy defender. That's my problem. I was trying to put it down to, is he a bad defender? Is it a case of, you know, he's just silly? And I think it's more across the face of he's just not very clever. And I guess what I mean by that is that how many times have we seen him just stop? You know, like I'm thinking again when we talk about it, the Bristol City goal, he just stops and kind of lets it all happen. I'm looking at the Ivan Toney one. You know, if he knows Ivan Toney is to his left, he's not just going to sit there and hold his hands up and stop and let the goal go in. I'm thinking about the Millwall game. The Wickham game where he just stops. Like it's just that there's no awareness.
The error for the Wickham game was it's pretty obvious. Like everyone can see the mistake he made. I think, yeah, like I wouldn't say I'm still convinced. I wouldn't say like I'm worried about it. Like if Grant Hanley plays the remainder of the games, I don't necessarily have a problem with that because I do. No. We've seen Hanley improve. But then, I think it's wishful thinking to expect Hanley to sort of play out the rest of the season because we know what happens to Hanley, unfortunately.
Well, the only kind of other thing I was going to say was if it just feels like we're conceding 2 to 3 chances a game directly through him. Now, don't get me wrong, we could be saving that in his kind of, other attributes that he has and possesses. But I just think it was from this week, something which was kind of, and I guess some of the weeks prior to that, something which I just kind of wanted to point out. And I guess just gather other people's opinions on it because I don't think Hanley's a bad defender. I think he is right to kind of be the partner to Ben Gibson. My worries are that his IQ, his football IQ, is the thing that I kind of question in that respect. And his defensive positioning is the only thing that I can, or awareness is the only thing that I can kind of critique from the last week.
I do wonder if maybe like in a weird way, like he looks worse because he's alongside Ben Gibson. Like all of a sudden, there's this player who's arrived who looks like he's just dropped from the football gods. Who we've been crying out for a left side. We've been crying out for Ben Gibson, right? No joke. I think we've been crying out for Ben Gibson like as long as I've watched Norwich City, which sounds ridiculous, but I've never he is my favourite centre back of all time. Like already, like I don't like it's I just think he's like exactly what we need. Like he's not perfect, he's not Van Dijk, right? But like just the way he plays, it's just brilliant. Like I don't know, like I've just got sudden like a rush of sort of like endorphins from Ben Gibson, but like
don't worry. I had that in the video we did with Ben and Ambrose, so don't worry about that.
But like, I mean, in my defense, I've now had sort of like 5 games to actually watch him play.
Well, I just foreshadowed it instead. Well, I guess because we've kind of covered it already and we're kind of hinting at it, let's just kind of get into the Bristol City game, which is fresh in the mind. I mean, it was one of those kind of make or breaks, really, because we kind of sat here at the end of last week and we said, how many points are you going to be happy with? And I said 2 in terms of keeping the run going, a point in each game. I genuinely would have been happy with a point out of each game to keep the kind of momentum alive. I think I remember you saying that maybe 3 you'd be happy with as long as we won 1, even if we lost another. And I think we had people on Twitter like Ian Gabelli who regularly kind of pitches in.
Good old Ian.
And he said 4. And I think in terms of if you'd have said to us at the start of the week, you're going to remain unbeaten, beat Bristol City, draw to Brentford, you'd be absolutely delighted at that, wouldn't you?
Well, 13 points from a possible 15 is a really healthy return. I said that the week we had Rotherham, Wickham and Birmingham, I felt like because of what had happened before, Norwich had to get 9 points from those games, and we'd done that. And then I sort of was like, my perception on Brentford was like, okay, well, we've kind of afforded ourselves to like, I don't think Norwich should ever be losing a game. I'll never go into a game going, I'll be happy with a loss because, like, with all due respect, like not to get over cocky or anything, but like we are like one of, if not the biggest side in this league. So I don't really think that should ever be the approach. But 4 points is a brilliant return from this week. And if you look at it across, obviously, the 2 weeks where I feel like that's really where you can start judging Norwich. It's impressive, and all of a sudden the mood music around Norwich is shifted quite considerably. And I think me and you are probably not guilty, but we're definitely starting to see not like the light at the end of the tunnel, but like the positivity that's like almost like football's honestly like so cyclical. Like it can just change like that, can't it? We say it week by week. Like, what will we think of next week? This time next week we could be sat here going, "Oh, we'll collapse," or we could be sat here saying we're top of the league and we're loving life. So
I think the nice thing about this game compared to a lot of other games was the fact that we've done something or a couple of things which we just haven't shown, but a lot of people have been asking for. And that was we started early. We actually took our chances. And that was the thing for me, is that if you go back and watch the first 15 minutes of every Norwich game, you'd probably be thinking, why aren't they winning the Premier League, right? Because it's unbelievable. If you then look at, like I said earlier, the middle part, that's when you go, this is a horrific team. And I think the thing is for me, which was nice, is that I don't get me wrong, of course, as we'll kind of allude to, we did concede within that kind of bracket, that first 15 minutes. But looking at those first two goals, and I guess analyzing them, it was just two fantastic runs from a striker which is beginning to show glimmers of his older self. I still will never say that Pukki is the same Pukki as before, because he just doesn't look like he possesses still the same confidence, as ridiculous as that kind of sounds. But the way I think I was watching Quest TV when they were kind of analyzing it, and it's the way that he's kind of turned his body to indicate to the players exactly where he wants the ball. And as soon as that comes, he's in a position where he can take that touch and hit the shot, and then it's a goal, right? Obviously, there's a lot of fortune for the second goal. That can't be denied. But the ball from Stiepermann was unbelievable. But the ball from Sorensen, I mean, that was... And we haven't even talked about Ben Gibson yet, So
Don't get me started on Ben Gibson again.
I just think it was a revelation, really. Like, that first half was the best first half of football I've seen since we went up.
Yeah, no, it was well, I don't know, Man City is always the elephant
maybe
in the
Man
room,
City,
isn't it? That still doesn't feel real. Like, I still watch that game and go, like, surely like that was just a dream. But no, like maybe like normal games of football, right? And I thought what really impressed me is you spoke about obviously being clinical early on. It does feel like if that was maybe a month before Pukki takes another touch to set himself up, and you've just, I don't know, like, it's got to be one or two touches, hasn't it, in the box? And that's what we're seeing a little bit more from Pukki now, which is good. And whether that is the confidence flowing through, you'd like to think so. I think what really impressed me was how dynamic we were. Like, I knew Norwich obviously were really good at keeping the ball, and then there was kind of this idea that we were going to try and implement more crosses into our game, which we've certainly done. I think we've got played like the second most highest crosses in the league or something stupid. Like, it's unbelievable. I don't know why. Also, we're feeling like we're Stoke City. But then to almost turn into like this like counter-attacking team, and like to be able to expose an opposition's high line in like such like such a dynamic pace, like it was just the defense splitting passes were unreal. And I think the thing as well, like if that's Todd or Mario or Emmy playing those passes, it's not maybe as big of a surprise because you're talking about like really technically proficient players. But like, with all due respect, like Marcus Stiepermann, Jakob Sorensen, and Ben Gibson aren't like no slouches in that regard. Like they're very good technically as well. But like, I mean, I didn't really know they all had that in their locker. Like, I've been a massive like critic of Stiepermann, and I think like rightly so. Like, his performances since we won the league have just been dreadful. Like, to be honest, like even in the Premier League, I don't think he ever had a good game. But that was his best performance in so long. And you talked about how Pukki's, like the partnership in general was just reminiscent of that season, and he almost looked like a foot taller than he has done in recent games. And I was so impressed with Stiepermann. I don't know, maybe it's just I don't know if hopefully it's not a flash in the pan. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully like he can build on this, and because it never really feels like a long-term option for me, Marcus Stiepermann there. The Jakob Sorensen is, I spoke about this in my match review, like the benefit of playing him there. Like, there's very few benefits and there's very few positives to having him there. But what actually happens is Paqueta pulls out wide ever so slightly to allow Sorensen to come in, and like the Bristol City defense was high, but like there wasn't much space to play those balls through. They're not like really over the top balls. And then the Ben Gibson goal is just, I'm not the Ben Gibson goal. The Ben Gibson pass for the Emmy goal.
Yeah.
Because like I said in my review, that I actually put down for the Buendia chance, like, surely it's like a matter of time until he scores. And obviously then he goes and does that, and it just felt like that was so crucial for Emi, because you don't want another game going where Emi's blown another chance, and all of a sudden, instead of choosing that rhetoric, you're talking about Emi Buendia probably being the best player in the league, which I think maybe is still a touch too generous. I still want to see a little bit more consistency before we start throwing around that tag. But could that game have ended up differently? Is maybe my only worry.
Yeah,
I look at the penalty, and who knows what would have happened. But I think what really impressed me, sorry, just to finish off, is the game management in its, like, I know the 3-1, the third goal, maybe you can't pick a better time to score to get a third goal, really, can you? But it was that 50 minutes after the start of the second half, like that 50 minutes, if Bristol get back into it, then all of a sudden it's a different game. But we stay fairly tight, and Tim Krul sort of comes to the rescue with his mind games, I suppose.
I think what's definitely evident for me is that, especially on Emi Buendia, obviously Emi Buendia is in a position where we've seen him miss big chances, pretty much won a game. And, looking back at the chance he had just before, about 5 minutes before, where, Bentley decided to sit with his face, you look at that and thinking, what it could have been. And then to still have the composure to, I'm not gonna lie, Thomas Callas has been well renowned since he's come through the ranks at Chelsea as a fantastic defender at this level. And, the way they play with their 3-5-2, he's like an integral part to that. And we absolutely broke him that first half, and I think it would, like, the fact that if you look back at the replay, he was trying to foul Emi Buendia so he couldn't get the shot off, tells you everything. I mean, the man's like 5'8" and he's holding off a defender like that and touching
his upper body strength is insane for somebody who's so small.
It's fantastic.
Unreal.
And I did love the point of the badge as well. That was a nice unnecessary touch.
It was quite interesting, actually, because the sort of, like, not the commentary before, but like the build up before, I think it was Gary O'Neill actually, who was basically saying that when sides play such different formations, like, it's usually one team like has to adapt. And I never really felt like that was going to be Norwich, because Norwich only ever really changed their formation unless they're changing it, like chasing a game, really. But I thought it was really interesting, actually, like how that point was made. And then Bristol City didn't adapt, but like they probably should have done, like, basically, like, because like the flaws were just, and like like they were just getting exposed. And Norwich really took advantage of that. And obviously, it's a real emphatic performance, not empathetic, as I nearly said.
Yeah.
In my review, which is funny. Norwich is really, they're just such a caring side.
No, you're not wrong. I must admit, watching that when I was editing that the other night was definitely did give me a laugh late at night. I think, like, another huge positive we've got to kind of allude to, and I know it sounds like a weird one to kind of praise in a way, but going off how we typically just set up defensively, we've conceded one goal again. And, like, don't get me wrong, you want to make it so you're getting clean sheets. I understand that. But for Norwich to consistently, like, I am so confident that against most teams in this league, Norwich would be able to score in 90 minutes more than one goal. So if we're limiting a lot of these teams to one goal, don't get me wrong, you've got to be, realistic and say that it's not going to happen every game. Like, I'm happy to accept that.
Yeah, no, it's tricky, because I completely agree. Norwich have looked better defensively, and if I doubt there's any other, like, fans listening to this that are not Norwich fans, but if other fans are watching and going, "What, you're happy that you've only conceded one goal?" Then, like, they're probably like thinking we're mad. But my only, like, slight worry is, like, why I think Norwich maybe needs to just manage how far. Certainly, Max Aarons. Obviously, you can't really talk about the left-hand side at the moment, but how far Max Aarons is advancing, because that's where that space opened up, and it's hard because he is on that right-hand side who provides our natural width. But sometimes maybe you just want him to just tighten up a little bit, and especially when you're 2-0 up, like, that's maybe the area which we need to improve in. And I agree, but, like, if Norwich can improve even just slightly, like, defensively, like, if we're getting there, but if we just tighten up just a little bit more, like I say, I completely agree. I'm confident Norwich will score in most games. So if you can keep a clean sheet, like it's such a football cliche, but like you put yourself in such a good like sort of position really. And I think we have so much creativity that like if Teemu Pukki's in form and is confident in scoring goals, then like it shouldn't be an issue. And you got somebody like Tim Krul in goal, you can just add a little bit more maybe. I don't think it's like a personnel change. I think it's just like an approach and a mentality shift in certain situations.
I think the thing is, which is weird, is that like Bristol City didn't play bad. That's the thing. Like Bristol City played well, and that game, when you look back at the chances, you look at the Chris Martin shot, which weirdly
What
when you
hit?
well, it's funny because when you watch the commentary back in the slow mo of the return angle where Tim Krul clearly saves it, the commentator goes, he doesn't get anywhere near it. I found that quite funny that day. But I guess when you've got a player like Tim Krul in goal, and the fact that I personally see a massive shift in his like if you look back at his performances the last time we were in the championship, there was some very questionable performances. I think that's a nice thing for me is that I can see how far he's come in this 2 years. Like you can almost see the confidence that he's got being, Dutch number one right now. I think that's the thing that I love at the moment is that like I look back to like the Ivan Toney save and the save for Chris Martin, like that's like what, 2 or 3 points in the space of a week that he's been like directly there for. So, I think you've kind of got to look at the elephant in the room as well and say, what is Wells doing for that penalty? I mean, I wouldn't even dream of doing that at 5 up, let alone at 3 went down.
I thought you were going to say I wouldn't dream of doing that at 5 aside. And to be fair, I don't think you'd have been wrong.
Under the bar.
To be honest, like it's not really our problem to discuss. Absolutely. I think maybe what I want to talk about is, like I said in my review, that actually like Tim Krul, it's almost like, is Tim Krul actually like technically that good at saving penalties, or is he just like the king of mind games? Like, is he like his mentality is just insane, and I think it's a big part as to why he's come on leaps and bounds, because like it's a lot harder to sort of be the goalkeeper Tim Krul is when you've been out for injured and haven't played for 2 years. Like he's getting a run of game, like obviously he's getting a run of game, so he has done consistently for a few years now, and there is always the fact that unfortunately Tim Krul isn't the youngest, but then again he's 31, 32, so he's hopefully still got a few years left in him, and certainly like even if this is really going off now, but like even if saying like 3 years time Tim Krul's performances start to diminish, like I'd like to think that Tim Krul is then the perfect like backup goalkeeper, because he is like home, like he counts as homegrown, which is good. His influence, and like even if like you could just see Tim Krul being here for years, like not necessarily as the number one, but like I think yeah. Well, we have such a good record of ex goalkeepers, becoming managers. Why not just stick with that? But no, I think like me and you are probably, I wouldn't say like the harshest critics I know of like about Tim Krul, but like I think we understand like how important like obviously like playing out from the back is and distribution. And I don't think Tim Krul, like I say, is bad at that, but that is the only area you want him to improve. But to be honest, mate, like when he's playing like that, he could kick out for a throw at every goal kick. I wouldn't care. Like he's playing so well at the moment. He's obviously is feeling extremely confident, and I think, to be honest, the Wales penalty incident is just going to make him push on even more. He's going to take even more of a buzz from that, because you could see from his reaction, like it's like he really treats those moments as like a one-on-one battle, and it's almost like that. It's just he really gets into the attacker's mind.
I think what was really good to see was that his pass success rate was so much higher than what average usually is, especially for his long balls as well. Like 79% for your goalie in the way we play. I think there's been games where it's been like 50% before, and we've been sitting there thinking, what's the point of playing out from the back when your goalie can't pass? And I think it's little things like that. Like if we play a game and our goal, and everyone plays their part like that, where, you've got players like Tim Krul, which start off the play making, a high amount of passes, and you've got players like Ben Gibson to then make a high amount of passes through to the 2 defensive midfielders. Like that is how we build, and that is how and that's why when I look back at these games, I think no wonder we've dominated this side. I think again it's fair to say that we the one kind of or the two players, if you like, in the team that really seem to have cemented themselves in the now is Lucas Ripp and Oliver Skipp. I think it's fair to say they've been fantastic this season, and weirdly they've been kind of like the most, in my mind, almost like the most crucial part to it, because they've given the defense a protection, if you like, which we haven't had really in players like Kenny McLean. And even Alex Tete to a degree, just mobility wise, So I think it's fair to say they're the kind of players that go missing, especially when you look at, again, like who scored rating when Kenny McLean comes on and hits it off someone's boot and gets a higher rating than Lucas Rupp. I guess my kind of point is how impressive you've been with those two, really, again, every week, it's just so consistent.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting you mentioned that, because today, I'm not sure if it'll be out by the time when this podcast is. I don't know when Gary's planning on releasing it, but I've written an article about those two. And I was comparing their like positioning using my beloved heat maps, which I absolutely adore. And I was comparing them to the four sort of central midfielders we had in that title winning season. And essentially, like, looking at their position, so obviously Ollie Skipp starts on the right, Lucas Rupp's on the left, and in very simple terms, like, their red areas are very like congregated and like densely populated in one specific area. And essentially, if you split the pitch into 3/3, like, they don't venture into the attacking third at all, really.
Yeah.
Once, or maybe like very rarely every now and then. And then if I looked at then what Leitner, Tribal, McLean and Vrancic were doing, and Leitner and Tribal in particular was basically just red all over, but like not as densely populated. So basically what I'm trying to say is the protection that they offer and the solidity in midfield is just so important, because how often, like, it probably just reaffirmed what I already like thought I was seeing, but in previous campaigns, we haven't got that partnership right. We didn't get it right in this first season because I think like Reed in particular was good, but like there was so many question marks about his physicality and stuff. Then we went to like almost like this Vrancic Tribal partnership, which at times, obviously that Leeds game will still live long in the memory, but there were still question marks over both of them. And then the complete opposite in Tate and McLean. And for me, this Rupp and Skipp partnership is just the most complete that we've seen under Farke. And they're two players that can do everything. They're all around. There's not. If I say to you, when we speak about Ollie Skipp and Lucas Rupp, there's not like an obvious flaw that comes to mind. Like, we're obviously not talking about like world class midfielders here, like obviously, but like they're like at this level, like they're so good. And I think all of a sudden Norwich now have a foundation to build on. And like I say, the space that they're restricting in the middle of the park is just, their positional awareness is brilliant, and it'll only get better over time. And it's the most, like I say, confident and assured I've been in a midfield partnership, because like we've seen, like I say, like I don't think I've ever really been this convinced by a partnership in midfield.
I think, to be honest, absolutely everything you say, I completely agree with. I think the one kind of word I'd boil it down to is just how disciplined they are. They are.
That's what I mean. Yeah, they don't venture from their like pre-assigned roles.
They're so positionally aware, and I think that's the lovely thing about it. When you've got a player like in the past, like a Leitner or something, even to a degree Vrancic, like I think that's another kind of reason why he may be so effective later on in games to kind of sidetrack is that those two players are just so well disciplined in the setup that we essentially want. Now, I've just had kind of like a thought to kind of end it on. Instead of going through like a man of the match per game, just like a player of the week, I guess. And I'd love to, hear if you've got to this point in the video as well, and you've got your personal player of the week as well, feel free to kind of leave that in the comments. That would be wonderful. But who is your kind of overall player of the week? Obviously covering Bristol City and Brentford.
That's a tricky question. Yeah, that's a tricky question. I think, like you said, Pukki obviously comes out of it well, predominantly because of his performance against Bristol City. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm pleased with everybody, to be honest. Like, I really obviously am impressed with Ben Gibson, but that's maybe more of a general thing. I don't know who's maybe impressed me most. Maybe Pukki, maybe Krul, actually, to be honest.
You know what? That was mine. Tim Krul was mine.
Yeah, I was sort of going back in reverse order from the lineup and ended up with Tim Krul and realised I had no other options. So yeah, I'd probably go Tim Krul.
I just think, you look back and you think if if Ivan Toney scores that, you go 2-0 down. It's a long way back from there. We were never going to get back if it was 2-0. You look at the game against Bristol, the imposing figure he is, and for a penalty, and the save he made for Chris Martin, and the other saves he made. Like I think such an not undervalued, but just sometimes you just kind of forget that. Oh, Tim Krul played a blind. Made a great save. Oh yeah, okay, normal.
I think that's probably what I just done, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Evidently. Well, that's it's probably a perfect place to kind of end things off. We've had a good natter about this week, and I think it's quite nice that we've got such a regular flow of games. We can kind of cover 2 in 1, and hopefully, if it's like this every week, it'll be nice and easy. We're just chanting about how great we are, right? In terms of, I guess, what's next, obviously, as the games come every week, or hopefully we can kind of do these regular fixtures on Zoom for the next month, and then we'll reassess, of course. If you have enjoyed the podcast, feel free to leave it a like and subscribe to us. We have just hit 50 subscribers on YouTube. Love it if we could get to 100 before Christmas, right? That'd be a lovely
that's all right
for us. Feel free to kind of subscribe, not only for that, but for the fact that we're going to be stuck inside now for a little while. So there's going to be plenty of regular content to kind of consume. If you're someone who is listening as well, I guess if it's on Spotify, if you could download the podcast, that just helps our metrics kind of discover how many people have watched it or listened to it, should I say. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you could give it a rating you feel fair, preferably a 5-star, that would be absolutely amazing. It's been myself and Billy, and until the next time, we'll see you later.